Hi, folks. This is Dr. Bear, of course, and I want to give you a little bit of background about Emily Dickinson as a poet. There are tons of websites, very good ones out there, as a matter of fact, um, giving information about her life. There are some specifics that we know, and there's just a whole lot we don't know because we don't have the material to back up all of the sort of suppositions that people have about her life, about her love life, about her relationships. There's some really good material that we have. But again, like everybody's life, there's a lot of stuff going on inside that we just don't know about. And it makes her, certainly for me, very intriguing because I really want to know more. One of the ways that I think we can find out more about Emily Dickinson is by her poems. These these are actual things, written kind of diaries, as it were, of things that were going on in her mind. And she wrote a lot. So I want to talk just for a few minutes about being a poet and Emily Dickinson as a poet. There are as many reasons for writing poetry as there are poets. There isn't one thing you can say, well, everybody writes about X or Y or Z. Or inspiration always comes from here or there or there. It just, I would be lying to you if I told you that, because poets have a very specific and unique way of looking at the world. That's what makes them wonderful. If Emily Dickinson had been writing exactly the way everybody else was writing, or her neighbor was writing, or whomever, then why would we want to read her writing? You know, the only reason that we want to read her writing is because she has something new to say to us, something that is intriguing and different in a kind of new context or a new way of looking. So why do poets write? I don't know. I truly don't know. I'm a poet, and I do know that the one absolute in my world as to why I write, whether it's poetry or memoir or anything else that I happen to be writing, um, the truth is that it's because I have to. There's something that lives inside of me that says, you've got to get this down somehow. It used to be, you've got to get this down on paper, but now, computer, I can get it down on the computer too. I resisted that for a while. I could not write poetry on the computer at all. It had to be pencil, and it had to be on paper. I needed to feel that connection to the paper itself, and the pencil provided me with that. I've kind of adjusted. I don't think it's been hurtful in any way to my work or to my mind or to my thinking. But I have to write. And sometimes people live inside my head. They just live there, or ideas live inside my head, or to the dismay of many of my teachers as I was in elementary school and throughout all of my schooling, I will suddenly see something that just captures me. And it can be a particular leaf. It can be a shadow. It can be the title of a book that just happens to be there as I walk into a room. Just a word sometimes. It just captures me. And then my brain just kind of keeps going with it. I'll jot down little notes sometimes. Again, much to the chagrin, that's a great word, isn't it? Much to the chagrin of many of my elementary school teachers who would walk around and, see what we were doing, and they'd look at me, Sylvia, will you please put your notebook away and get to the mathematics at hand? Yes, ma'am. So, why did Emily Dickinson write? Again, we don't know, except that apparently she had to. She wrote from a very young age. We have material from when she was very young. Um, and we're very lucky that we have a lot of letters. We don't have all of them. We keep waiting for more to show up in somebody's attic somewhere or under floorboards somewhere. We do know that her sister burned a lot of letters after she died, after Emily died. Her sister Lavinia burned a lot of letters and writings that were sent to Emily. But Emily sent letters out to people, and a lot of them. Remember, in the mid 1800s, there was no such thing as a telephone. The way that people communicated with each other was through letters, or by being in the same town. And even if you were in the same town, the postman, and it was, I believe, almost exclusively a man, the postman would come to your door several times a day. It wasn't just once a day, and would pick up letters that needed to be mailed and would then take them to the other part of town where somebody happened to be. So Emily could be communicating with people just across town by letter. And in fact, we know she was, because we have letters that those people had in their homes that she had written. Again, I don't know what you're like, but I'm a saver of stuff. I have an entire floor right here in my house, upstairs, third floor, with boxes and boxes of stuff, letters and photographs, back when we had actual photographs, from my past, from my parents, from my grandparents. I even have my great grandparents' photographs from way back in the turn of from the 1800s to the 1900s. My grandfather had a store, and I have a photo of the front of his store in 1904, which is really cool to have. So we have a lot of this material stuff in our possession about Emily Dickinson as well. And mainly what we have are letters that she wrote to others. But as I said a few minutes ago, our main way of knowing what was going on in her mind and in her soul is through her poetry. We don't know much about what was going on in her life through her poetry, because she didn't really write about her life, about doing this or doing that, or going to that party, or seeing this person or that person. She wrote about what was going on inside of her. And she wrote thousands of poems, probably more, but we only have a certain number of poems, over 1,000. We're not really sure of the number, because some things are called poems that are maybe not, and some things are part of letters. So certainly almost 2,000, let's call it. Well, if we read those carefully, we begin to get a sense of what it felt like to be inside the middle of her brain. We get a sense of what it felt like to be a person trapped inside of your own mind. That's true for all of us, isn't it? We're all trapped inside of our own minds. This is how we live. This is who we are. And she was no different in that respect. What made her different is that she talked about it. She wrote about it. She explored it. And she was braver than most of us, because she really kept mucking about in there until she came up with something that was worth examining, was worth looking at, holding in your hand, addressing it from lots of different views. Her mind, her soul, ultimately what it meant to be human. And that's a very interesting way to spend your life, isn't it? Just to back up a tiny bit before I wrap up this particular video. There are, as I said, a ton of poems. Let's call it almost 2,000, maybe, less, maybe more. We don't know because, again, some are lost. And it depends on what you call a poem. But the first person that we have who really went through all of the poems that were available at the time was Johnson. And Thomas Johnson published a book of Emily Dickinson's complete poems. And he did that in the early 1950s. He went through all of her actual poems that he held in his hand and looked at and tried to figure out where they fit, which one seemed like it was written first, because she did not title anything. She never put any dates on things. I think she kind of had the organizational structure that I have, which is not very good. And so she didn't really date anything. So we have no way of knowing. But Thomas Johnson meticulously went through and tried to look at penmanship, and then kind of looked at some words that she sort of got stuck using and put them in a particular order. And he gave the first poem that he thought she had written first, the number 1. And then he just numbered them from then on out. And that was a definitive volume of all of her work for a while. And then R.W. Franklin came along, another noted Emily Dickinson scholar, and he said, yeah, I got some issues with some of this. We have a few things that we're looking at a little differently now. We have a little bit more information. I think this poem actually came before that poem. So he redid the sort of timeline of the poems and renumbered them. So what you'll see these 2 volumes behind me, and one of them is the R.W. Franklin full 2-volume set of all of her work, and the other one is the Franklin 2-volume set of all of her poems. Because I kind of fell in love with her work when I was reading Johnson's numbering, Johnson's complete works, that's the one that I tend to go by. But a lot of people go, especially contemporary scholars, tend to go by the Franklin. So sometimes you'll see a number 595J. That means that it's numbered by Johnson as number 595. Or you'll see a W, an F, an F. So you'll see 424, the same poem, 424 with F for Franklin. So when you see those letters, you understand that they came, one Franklin, the other one Johnson. To finish off this very first sort of backgroundy lecture on just writing poetry and her poetry in general, she's captured the imagination because she's so original and she's so enigmatic. Another great word. She's so enigmatic that she's captured certainly not just my imagination, but hundreds and thousands of people's imaginations with her writing. And a lot of scholars have done an awful lot of work. Behind me, you'll see just several rows of Emily Dickinson books. Down farther, I have 2 more compartments that are 5 shelves full of work about her work. So there's an awful lot to be learned about Emily Dickinson, people looking at it from so many different angles. But ultimately, the best way to know anything about her is to read her work, because then we're really looking at what's going on inside of her mind and inside of who she is. And in the next couple of videos, I'm going to take you inside that mind just a little bit and explore. Bye.